Are you doing what is most appropriate and most effective for your interior journey right now? There hasn't been a lot of discussion, I think, outside of maybe very rarefied circles and classical spiritual literature about the journey, the developmental process of our relationship with Christ, like each of our relationship with Christ and with God. And so what happens then is that those of us who have begun to desire, a deeper relationship with God for whatever reason, because I want to say there are many reasons that people start thinking that that they want to have a close relationship with God. But whatever those reasons may be, we don't have an appreciation that this is a process and this is a journey, just like physically, biologically, from the time a child is conceived in the womb and develops in the mother's womb and is born as a newborn infant to the time it starts taking solid food, it begins to crawl, walk, to going to school, grade school, becoming an adolescent, teenager, to being a mature adult, to being the whole life cycle. There are different stages to the biological journey. That part we take for granted, right? We understand. And at different parts of that developmental process, the kind of nutrition that's needed is different. The kind of intellectual stimulation is different. The kind of attachment that a person needs, with their caregivers, the social needs, everything, all that's is different, and in different fields and disciplines, I guess, that's studied, right? Like psychological development, moral development, physical development. Well, what about spiritual development? What about our relationship with God? Just like any relationship with another human person, it doesn't go from 0 to 100 at once. And it doesn't matter usually how intense kind of conversion experiences some of us may have had, whether it's one time, twice, 3 times, or some of us may not have any intense spiritual conversion experiences to point to. That's actually kind of secondary. That's incidental, right? It doesn't mean that just because we've had a very mind-blowing spiritual experience, conversion experience, then that we're suddenly like totally tight with God already and we're almost there. And that's not true. If that's the case, the world will be a very different place. So, given that the spiritual journey happens in stages and development and develops and unfolds in different stages, do we know kind of where we are in the journey, not for the sake of being very scrupulous about it or judging ourselves that we're not moving fast enough, because the spiritual journey takes as long as it takes. Okay, it's I can't possibly talk about this in a video or even in a much longer talk. It's mystery. It is something that requires the initiative of grace, of God's grace, and our response, our free response. And in the midst of all that, there are so many different things to consider, right? So sometimes we overstay where we should have already moved on. So take, for example, if a child is in nursery and stays in nursery when they've already developed beyond that. Maybe they're not 5, they're 6, they're ready for grade school, primary school, and they're still staying in nursery. How is that going to help them develop fully as a human being? It's not, right? And it's not just age. Sometimes the particular person's psychological needs, intellectual, mental needs, all that plays into, these are factors that need to be considered. So how much consideration have you put into your spiritual development? Okay, and not just a unidimensional kind of spiritual development, but I'm talking about your whole person, your whole person's journey to God? Have you considered what are the handicaps that you may have? Because it's not just about what you're willing to do, but what wounds you may have that's making you reluctant or making it difficult for you to make this journey. How might those wounds maybe be addressed? How are the current circumstances of your life maybe inhibiting you from drawing closer to Christ? How might maybe your overcommitment to doing things that are religion and church related giving you a false sense of security that you're actually growing closer to God when actually you're as distant as you always have been from Him? There are many different questions to consider, and that's not even talking yet about the unique way that you are made, the personality, temperament, the motivational design that God has given you. All these things actually play a very important role in helping us on our journey, because not everyone is called to God in the same way. In fact, no two people are called to draw closer to God in the exact same way, right? So what are some of the underlying principles about the developmental journey, of the spiritual journey? And then on the other hand, what are some of the specifics that we need to understand about ourselves so that we can help ourselves make progress in a way that doesn't involve unnecessary pain, unnecessary suffering, because we're trying all the kind of things that work very well for maybe our brother or our sister, but is completely wrong for us. Something to think about.